So today we're going to be talking about investment and the paradox that comes along with successful companies. Essentially, success doesn't a good idea doesn't necessarily equal success, and in order for a product like some of yours to succeed, you need a lot more than just a great idea. So with me on stage today, we have Sheldon Laub. He's a serial entrepreneur and angel investor. He was also the first chief innovation officer for PricewaterhouseCoopers. He's a local Las Vegas native and an awesome supporter of AFWorks and everything that we do. Next to him, we have Warren Katz. He is a serial entrepreneur and angel investor as well. And he is the managing director of the Techstars Autonomous, it's a mouthful, the Techstars Counter UAS program in Boston. And there's about 6 teams out here that are also exhibiting. Go say hi to them. So next to him, we have Bill Botts. He is a serial entrepreneur and angel investor and advisor, and he's a very busy guy. Let's put it that way. And he's very good to entrepreneurs. And next to him, we have Phil Randazzo. He is the CEO of American Dream University, which just opened a co-working space that helps veterans transition into from active duty into entrepreneurship. And he's doing some really great work over there. So today, guys, what we want to do is we want to talk to the audience, and we want to let them know about like how to get some investment and what are some of the challenges as it relates to like building a company from idea to launch. And I was just hoping that maybe some of you could actually jump in there and say what are the biggest challenges that you see as it relates to getting a prototype to a successful company.
Well, I'll start. I think the most important thing for entrepreneurs to focus on is what's the market for your product. The biggest distraction and one of the greatest failure points for almost all entrepreneurs is getting too distracted with too many opportunities. You got to start and say, we're focusing on this part of the market and we're going to drive this business into this market and then expand.
So Techstars actually has a mantra that we do not recruit companies, we recruit founders. There's a fairly high correlation between an individual who has number one characteristic of a successful entrepreneur is tenacity. Never, ever, ever, ever gives up. And it's when you hit a roadblock, you go around, you up, down, over, whatever. And Techstars, at least not my program, but most of the other programs in Techstars actually don't care what the business idea is. They interview for the skill set of a founder, and they're comfortable that a team with good founders will eventually find the right idea. But if they have the characteristics of good founders, they'll stumble around, but eventually have a successful company.
I heard Brad Feld say, we look for 5 things. Team, product, market.
Yeah. Techstars goes a little overboard on that, and with a vertical program that has to have an idea that the vertical partner likes, you can't just do that. Idea kind of has to come first, and then you make sure the team's able to execute on it. But tenacity of the founders is probably that number one characteristic.
When George asked me to be on this panel, I tried to figure out what an investment paradox is. I'm not sure whether it's a paradox or a conundrum or whatever, but basically what it is, in my mind, is good technology, good ideas don't automatically succeed. It takes a lot of things beyond technology to make them succeed. And I think the people here that I've talked to seem to have their eye on a combination of the military and the general use of technology that might help them facilitate building a company. So the entrepreneur needs to do some very careful things in the market area and take his eye a little bit off of pure technology and really get business oriented.
Yeah. Phil?
Yeah, so I would say chasing squirrels is a big thing, right? We were talking back in the green room, and I'm sitting at the kids' table compared to these 3 gentlemen over here. They're super impressive, but just getting focused and again, narrowing your market and find out who your target market is and not going off on all these different directions is so important. And then I would also say, you got to keep asking yourself, what could go wrong? and make a list of questions of what could go wrong. And I think that's
mitigate them.
extremely important. I think they always think what could go right. It's the crazy Chinese math versus what could go wrong. Those are my thoughts on that.
So chasing squirrels is a good analogy, absolutely. So what can you tell me about like getting a board of advisors and getting mentorship and all of that? So one thing that I've seen at a lot of tech accelerators like Techstars, 500 startups, et cetera, is that when they do their mentor madness week, a lot of founders are just overwhelmed. They're just shell shocked with so much advice, and they're trying to chase all of the advice. So, what can you tell the crowd about forming a board of advisors, forming an actual board, management board as well? When do you need to do that, or when should you start forming that? When should you start thinking about that, or take it any direction you want?
So in Techstars, we have this, as you mentioned, this 3-week period called Mentor Madness, where every company is exposed. In my program, it was about 75 mentors, and all of the mentors were either serial entrepreneurs, venture capitalists, subject matter experts of some kind. It was a little bit of information overload. The entrepreneurs then asked to select 3 lead mentors out of that group, and what we found was that may have been a little bit too much, because they would want to pick more than 3 lead mentors, or weren't able to execute on any of the advice that all of them gave. So I'll probably prune that down next year. But they tended to wisely pick those people who had familiarity with their industries, familiarity with those type of products, not necessarily the technologists, but the people who would be able to form markets and give them a good understanding of a better color on the demographics of the customer and how to approach them and the value proposition, that kind of thing. That seemed to be what most of the companies gravitated towards.
Yeah, absolutely. So what about forming a board of advisors and surrounding yourself with people a support group, a support network?
Let me jump in on that. I'll put my investor hat on, and there's a couple of rules I have. One is the entrepreneur, CEO, whatever he or she is, must be mentorable. 2 of the biggest failures in the Las Vegas, Vegas Valley Angel investments were misjudging entrepreneurs that knew everything, pretended like they were mentorable, and they weren't. Both companies failed. $2.5 million went into one of them over a period of years. So I have to judge and be convinced that he's mentorable. And secondly, I want a CEO, an entrepreneur that's willing to listen to others. I want advisory board or a board, or I want people recruited as advisors to the company that bring knowledge, whether it's business or technical or whatever, that the entrepreneur is willing to listen. That's so critical in my mind.
Absolutely. Phil, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't reach out to a whole bunch of people and say, hey, I'm looking for a mentor. That's just a really difficult way, and people don't want a second job or a third job or a fourth job. I'd reach out to them and just maybe offer to provide some value first, see where you can help that person, and then approach it that way. I get asked almost times, I don't have time to mentor. Someone wants to come over and chat with me or have a cup of coffee or reach out. That's a great way to do it, but when they provide value to me first, that's something good. And not monetary value, just
Yeah, that brings up a really good point. Like, where do you find support? How do you build your support network around your company and your idea? Anyone have any thoughts on that?
Well, ultimately, if you're a true entrepreneur, you have to be able to start by having some set of resources around. Okay? The idea that you know nobody, you've never met anybody, and you have this idea and you're going to create a business that goes, you probably are not going to make it. Right? Because it's the same way I think about it. You know, where do you raise the first $10,000? You're going to raise it from people you know who believe in you. And if you have nobody who believes in you, well then, you know, you may want to think of a different line of work.
That is actually what Techstars, the Techstars, #1 logo is the network that helps entrepreneurs succeed.
The family.
When you sign up, what you get is this access to 10,000 mentors around the world, 2,000 contacts to 2,000 venture capitalists, all the alumni. There's 1,600 alumni company that'll help you out. And we actually have a pretty strict rule. I do, and most of the other managing directors enforce it pretty harshly. That as soon as we detect that a mentor might be angling for a financial relationship with the company, we get rid of them.
Yeah.
All of our mentors are there because they're successful entrepreneurs whose first instinct is to give back just for altruistic reasons. And if something comes of it later, great. But as soon as I detect that any of our mentors is saying, hey, why don't you hire me for this, or why don't you, put me on the board that, and why don't you, pay me for biz dev or whatever, I'll never ask them back. They're gone.
But by the way, my experience has been that advisory boards or boards can be constructed with people that really bring the missing links, whether it's business or whatever. And over my career, first CEOship I had was 1978. Every board I had, I constructed to be me plus 4 or 5 outsiders that brought expertise that complemented what I was capable of. And I only paid them in stock options. Not a nickel was ever paid to one of my advisor directors other than some reimbursement of travel expenses. But you can get top-notch people willing to help. Even your investment, the people that invest in you, sometimes bring an expertise that would be of value. So don't overlook the angels or the investors that might invest in your company.
One of the best pieces of advice I ever got was I asked somebody, how do you pick a board? And my good friend said, pick people whose advice you actually are interested in listening to. It's very important not to pick people because they have the right title, because
right.
They have the right resume, but people who you actually would listen to what they have to say.
Yep.
Yeah, you have to at least like working with these people.
Right.
Just like hiring an employee, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
And I would just add one thing, and here's a line that we teach at our academy. It's when you contact somebody, say, I would love to learn how you became a success. Because everyone wants to say, oh, they want to sit down with me, they think I'm successful. And then the other thing is, and you really got to learn how to communicate, especially if you're in the military. You need to learn a different language when you get out of the military. So I highly suggest books like How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie, which Warren Buffett credits to this day where he's at. So you really got to learn to communicate with people in a totally different language.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about sources of capital. There's a ton of ways to bring in capital into your young startup. What do you believe the best way for an individual that has a prototype that is exhibiting here? What's the best way for them to chase capital, and where should they start?
The standard advice I give every founder that I've ever mentored is you have just 100% of your brain, and you can dedicate it, you divide it up and dedicate it to whatever you want. But if whatever amount of time you're spending selling equity in your company to investors, you're not spending selling your product to customers. And you'd much prefer to advance sell product to customers who are not taking equity in your company. They're giving you cash, perhaps cash in advance, a prepayment on buying products. So that's typically my number one advice. Go get non-dilutive equity, primarily from the customers who are willing to pay you up front, prepay you for product. Non-dilutive equity from the government, from government grants, is a very, very close second. I often get the question or the criticism, well, isn't that taking you off course or away from where your vision of the commercial product really is supposed to be? And what I usually tell those people is, first of all, you're probably not right in exactly what your commercial product should be anyway. So you should probably let the customer base drag you where they want to drag you, as opposed to where you thought you should go in the beginning. And a technology, a contract like this, as any kind of small business contract, there will be a certain yield of common investment of what you would have pulled out of your pocket anyway to advance your technology, and then there'll be a little bit of waste. And I usually term this, whoever's been a sailor, I term this tacking back and forth across the course. Okay, so if you're going from point A to point B, you know, with venture capital, you raise a large amount of venture capital, you have the luxury of making the mistake of going in a straight line to where you think you really should be. But if you take small amounts of research contracts, you know, you wind up tacking back and forth along a course, and some of it's high yield, and some of it's a waste, but your course may be taking you to a place that you really didn't expect or suspect, which is the right place you really want to be.
You're
Good point. Yeah.
ratcheting up.
He's right. The longer you can go on non-equity money, the better off you're going to be, both in valuation when you finally have to do a deal, but also you're creating an image that's going to an investor, look like you're much more for real if you're further down the pike. So if you can do it with non-equity, but you don't want to get in a position where you're paced by the cash, that you're slowing down and stopping because you've sort of outpaced that non-equity money. So it's a balance you got to walk through.
So, Phil, can you maybe talk through the stages of capital?
Well, I mean, I think these guys are better qualified to talk about that. I mean, I've definitely raised some money, and I've invested in a handful of companies, probably more than that. And I'll use the phrase, I forget who, I think it was Mark Twain. I sure hope I break even on a few of those deals. I could use the money, kind of a thing.
That's good.
So I think they're better to speak about it. But I would tell everyone here who's listening. I see some people taking notes, which is great. I mean, this is like wisdom beyond wisdom. And you guys should be connecting with the people on this panel immediately and asking to see how they made a success, and maybe see if they have a few minutes to take a look and see what your pitch looks like and see where you're going, who your market is. These guys are brilliant. I mean, I'm playing at a much smaller level than these guys, but it's all about connections. Charlie Tremendous Jones says it's all about the books you read and the people you meet. And the fact that you guys are here listening to this is tremendous, but you gotta connect with guys like this, because it's just a wealth of knowledge for sure.
Yeah, so, thank you. You're far too modest, by the way, Phil.
The kind of money you raise, if it's not the sort of free money from deals and contracts and military injections, the easiest is family and friends and business associates. When I've done startups, that's where I started, to where I could get enough traction to begin to really sell the concept. Then you get into angel investing, or you might jump to VCs. But I got to tell you, venture capital is a long, hard road. My first venture capital initiative, I made 50 presentations at 3000 Sand Hill Road before I got one VC to step up to the plate. Thank God they did, but it was a long, hard. I don't think it's gotten easier, particularly if you're small. If you're going after 10 million, you got a really great developed technology, maybe it's easier, but that's a very difficult one. It's family, friends, contracts, out of your own pocket. Those are the easiest funds to come by.
All right, well, guys, I think we're almost out of time, but I think we can squeeze in one more. So what do you look for in a founder or a company or an idea? Like, what pushes you over the edge to make that decision?
Well, for me, it's passion. Someone who is just going to move heaven and earth to get their idea into reality. There's nothing there's no, nothing substitutes for that. And you can feel it when you meet with them, that they are going to go and change the world. Without that,
Yep.
Yeah, I would. That would have been my number one too. Passion/tenacity. Somebody who's absolutely will not give up. There's nothing else they could or would do, no matter what. A close second to that is, and it's not all, you can't always do this, but would I buy the product myself? Would I use the product myself? Am I feeling that same pain? Can I really empathize and commiserate with the pain that entrepreneur is solving? And do I say, absolutely, yes, I have it, I get it, I understand it? That would be.
That brings up a really good point. So about which investors you should actually go after and target. People that know your product, know
Right.
your market, know. Maybe we could speak to that for a moment.
Well, given the entrepreneur is very committed, I have 4 M's. He needs to be mentorable, The market needs to be scalable. It needs to be big enough that it can become a real company. The management, if there's more than just the entrepreneur, is a credible team. And those are the four. And so the 4 M's is what I go by. Once you've gotten over the hurdle, this guy's really committed and got something good.
And I would just add, how many other things does this person asking me for money has, right? If they've got 5 other companies and this is 20% of their focus,
Yeah.
I'm out.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
I'm out instantly.
Agree.
That's a very good point. You need 100% focus.
Yeah.
They need to be doing it
Focus.
full time. No part-time entrepreneurs. That's
Unless, of
absolutely-
course, you're Elon Musk, and then it's okay.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Right.
So, gentlemen, do you have any parting thoughts for our audience?
Let me add one thing. I walked every booth today, talked to at least half of them. The ones that are going to succeed are the ones that have their eye on both the military and commercial. And I'd say half of them do. And the one extreme was somebody told me our market is $27 billion a year, and we're going after it. But that market is not what they're going after. They got to go after some segments that are higher priority. Maybe eventually you go after 27 billion, but you got to focus and you've got to have a real market, and you better do both the commercial and the military.
Brings up a really good point. I forget where I heard it, but I love this quote. Get it right for one person before you go chasing after 10,000.
Yeah, that's right.
I would also add that I built my company in SBARs and BAAs and small government contracts. Winning small S&T, R&D type contracts from the DoD, I felt was actually fairly easy, and the customer's a pretty good customer. But there was a glass ceiling for small businesses and breaking through and getting a real production, contract and fighting it out with the big guys. And there's a pretty a daunting chasm there. So I would reiterate that you can use this to replace a seed round or an A round. This is great money, but you better have a commercial market that is your end goal, end result, because you'll have actually an easier time getting through the commercial market where it really is a meritocracy and the best product wins, rather than the DoD that has all these ulterior influences going on that oftentimes prevents the best mousetrap from seeing the light of day.
I would tell entrepreneurs when they're getting started, and if you're just starting or trying to start a company, if you are unable to convince any of your family and friends and close associates to back you, think hard about whether this actually is such a good idea. Entrepreneurs get so carried away because they believe this is the greatest thing since sliced bread. But if they can't convince anyone who knows and loves them to agree with them, they better think long and hard about how good this idea might really be.
Absolutely. You should interview your customers also. I want to leave with this. Talk to your customers. If you're not talking to your customers and you basically have this great idea that you think is wonderful and you're not actually validating it, you're in for a rude awakening. Do not go building a product until you understand your customer's pain and you've talked to them and shown them a paper prototype or something before moving.
And I just want to add, you got to learn how to market. I mean, you really need to get into the mind of your customer. You have to be a brilliant marketer, or find somebody on your team that can market. If you're the engineer or technical person, you got to be able to market and you got to be able to storytell.
Yep. The three-legged stool of startups: the hacker, the hustler, and the painter. So
Yeah.
that one, I like that one. So gentlemen, I think we are all out of time.
Yep.
But I'd love to sit here and talk all day. But